Welcome back to another exciting video. Today's video is a mysterious one indeed, as we are looking into the most mysterious aviation mysteries ever. We are sure there are other aviation mysteries which was not included on today's list. Please note, as always, these mysteries are not in any particular order. If you haven't already, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button. And if you want to be notified whenever I upload new video, don't forget to hit the bell. Well, let me stop rambling and jump in. 1. Flying Tiger Line Flight 739. Flying Tiger was a Lockheed Super Constellation prop liner hired by the United States military. According to reports, Flying Tiger had 93 U.S. soldiers and 3 South Vietnamese soldiers on board at the time of its disappearance on March 16, 1962 over western Pacific Ocean. Flying Tiger was taking the soldiers from the Travis Air Force Base in California to Saigon, Vietnam. It is believed that the Flying Tiger landed for refueling at the Anderson Air Force Base in Guam and was en route to Clark Air Base in the Philippines when it disappeared. A few days after all 107 people on board were declared missing and presumed dead, the disappearance of Flying Tiger prompted the largest air and sea searches in the history of the Pacific, as the U.S. military had ships join the search from 4 its military branches. They searched for the remains of Flying Tiger for more than 144,000 square miles during the course of 8 days. It was only later reported that a civilian tanker is believed to have seen an in-flight explosion, now believed to be the missing Flying Tiger, although there were never any wreckage or debris recovered. 2. EgyptAir Flight 990. The EgyptAir Flight was a regular flight between the Los Angeles International Airport and the Cairo International Airport, with only one stop at the John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. On October 31, 1999, Boeing 767, who was accustomed to the route, suddenly crashed in the Atlantic Ocean just 60 miles south of the Nantucket Island in Massachusetts, killing all 217 passengers and crew it had on board. Because the crash happened in international waters, the investigation was done by 2 aviation agencies, namely the Egyptian Civil Aviation Agency and the National Transport Safety Board, under the rules of the International Civil Aviation Organization. The Egyptians soon realized that they lacked the resources to continue the investigation stipulated by the National Transportation Board. The Egyptian government and the American government agreed to have the National Transportation Safety Board handle the investigation. However, after 2 weeks, the National Transportation Safety Board suggested handing the investigation to the FBI, as they had found evidence that suggested the crash might not have been an accident. The Egyptian authorities quickly refused the proposal and forced the National Transportation Board to continue the investigation, even though the case was outside of their investigative expertise. The National Transportation Safety Board found that the probable cause of the accident was the airplane's departure from normal cruise flight and subsequent impact with the Atlantic Ocean as a result of the relief first officer's flight control inputs, but did not determine a specific reason for the relief first officer's alleged actions. The Egyptian Civil Aviation Agency concluded that the incident was caused by mechanical failure of the aircraft's elevator control system. The National Transportation Safety Board, however, dismissed their own report, stating they found no possible scenario that could explain the flight's final movements other than the intentional human act. 3. Air France Flight 447. Air France Flight 447 was a scheduled international passenger flight from Rio de Janeiro in Brazil to Paris, France. On the 1st of June 2009, the pilots of the flight failed to recover the plane after stalling the Airbus A330 which served the flight, causing the plane to crash into the Atlantic Ocean, killing all 228 passengers and crew on board. The Brazilian Navy recovered the first major wreckage, and 2 bodies, from the sea within 5 days of the accident, but the investigation by France's Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety was hampered because the aircraft's flight recorders were not recovered from the ocean floor until May 2011, nearly 2 years later. The BEA's final report, released at a news conference on the 5th of July 2012, concluded that the aircraft suffered temporary inconsistencies between the airspeed measurements, likely resulting from ice crystals obstructing the aircraft's pitted tubes, which caused the autopilot to disconnect. after which the crew reacted incorrectly and ultimately caused the aircraft to enter an aerodynamic stall, from which it did not recover. The accident is the deadliest in the history of Air France, as well as the deadliest aviation accident involving the Airbus A330-4. Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 was a hired flight from Montevideo, Uruguay, bound for Santiago, Chile, that crashed in the Andes Mountains on the 13th of October 1972. The accident and subsequent survival became known as the Andes flight disaster and the miracle of the Andes. While crossing the Andes during poor weather, the inexperienced co-pilot Laguerrera was at the controls of the Fairchild FH-227D. He mistakenly believed the aircraft had reached Curacao, where the flight would turn to descend into Pudahue Airport. He failed to notice that instrument readings indicated he was still 37 to 43 miles from Curacao. He began descending and the aircraft struck a mountain, shearing off both wings and the tail section. The remaining portion of the fuselage slid down a glacier at an estimated 220 miles per hour and descended about 2,379 feet before crashing into ice and snow. The flight was carrying 45 passengers and crew, including 19 members of the Old Christians Club rugby union team, along with their families, supporters, and friends. 3 crew members and 9 passengers died immediately. Several more died soon afterward due to the frigid temperatures and the severity of their injuries. The wreck was located at an elevation of 11,710 feet in the remote Andes of far western Argentina, just east of the border with Chile. Authorities flew over the crash site several times during the following days, searching for the aircraft, but could not see their white fuselage against the snow. Search efforts were cancelled after 8 days. During the following 72 days, the survivors suffered extreme hardships, including exposure, starvation, and an avalanche, which led to the deaths of 13 more passengers. The remaining passengers resorted to cannibalism. As the weather improved with the arrival of late spring, 2 survivors, Nando Parado and Roberto Canessa, climbed a 15,260 feet mountain peak without gear and hiked for 10 days into Chile to seek help, traveling 38 miles. On the 23rd of December 1972, 2 months after the crash, the last of the 16 survivors were rescued. The news of their miraculous survival drew worldwide headlines that grew into a media circus. 5. TransWorld Airlines Flight 800. TransWorld Airlines Flight 800 was a Boeing 747-100 that exploded and crashed into the Atlantic Ocean near East Moriches, New York, on July 17, 12 minutes after takeoff from John F. Kennedy International Airport, on a scheduled international passenger flight to Rome, with a stopover in Paris. All 230 people on board died in the crash. It is the 3rd deadliest aviation accident in U.S. history. Accident investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board traveled to the scene, arriving the following morning amid speculation that a terrorist attack was the cause of the crash. Consequently, the FBI and New York Police Department Joint Terrorism Task Force initiated a parallel criminal investigation. 16 months later, it was announced that no evidence of a criminal act had been found and closed its active investigation. The 4-year investigation concluded with the approval of the aircraft accident report on August 23, 2000, ending the most extensive, complex and costly air disaster investigation in U.S. history at that time. The report's conclusion was that the probable cause of the accident was explosion of flammable fuel vapors in the center fuel tank. Although it could not be determined with certainty, the likely ignition source was a short circuit. Problems with the aircraft's wiring were found, including evidence of hacking in the fuel quantity indication system, FCIS, wiring that enters the tank. The FCIS on Flight 800 is known to have been malfunctioning, the captain remarked on crazy readings from the system about 2 minutes and 30 seconds before the aircraft exploded. As a result of the investigation, new requirements were developed for aircraft to prevent future fuel tank explosions. 6. Lady Be Good disappearance. Lady Be Good is a B-24D Liberator bomber that disappeared without a trace on its first combat mission during World War II. The plane, which was from the 376th Bomb Group of the United States Army Air Forces, was believed to have been lost, with its 9-man crew, in the Mediterranean Sea while returning to its base in Libya following a bombing raid on Naples on April 4, 1943. However, the wreck was accidentally discovered 440 miles inland in the Libyan desert by an oil exploration team from British Petroleum on November 9, 1958. Investigations concluded that the first time, all new crew failed to realize they had overflown their airbase in a sandstorm. After continuing to fly south into the desert for many hours, the crew bailed out when the plane's fuel was exhausted. The survivors then died in the desert trying to walk to safety. All but one of the crew's remains were recovered between February and August 1960. The wreckage of Lady Be Good was taken to a Libyan Air Force base after being removed from the crash site in August 1994. 7. Avro Lancastrian Stardust accident on the 2nd of August 1947. Stardust, a British South American Airways Avro Lancastrian airliner on the flight from Buenos Aires, Argentina, to Santiago, Chile, crashed into Mount Tupungato in the Argentine Andes. An extensive search operation failed to locate the wreckage. Despite covering the area of the crash site, the fate of the aircraft and its occupants remained unknown for over 50 years, giving rise to various conspiracy theories about its disappearance. In the late 1990s, pieces of wreckage from the missing aircraft began to emerge from the glacial ice. It is now believed that the crew became confused as to their exact location while flying at high altitudes through their, then poorly understood, jet stream. Mistakenly believing they had already cleared the mountaintops, they started their descent when they were in fact still behind cloud-covered peaks. Stardust crashed into Mount Tupungato, killing all aboard and burying itself in snow and ice. The last word in Stardust's final Morse code transmission to Santiago Airport, Stendg, was received by the airport control tower 4 minutes before its planned landing and repeated twice. It has never been satisfactorily explained. 8. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 was an international passenger flight operated by Malaysia Airlines that disappeared on the 8th of March 2014 while flying from Kuala Lumpur International Airport in Malaysia to its planned destination, Beijing Capital International Airport. The crew of the Boeing last communicated with air traffic control around 38 minutes after takeoff when the flight was over the South China Sea. The aircraft was lost from ATC radar screens minutes later, but was tracked by military radar for another hour, deviating westwards from its planned flight path, crossing the Malay Peninsula and Andaman Sea. It left radar range 200 nautical miles northwest of Penang Island in northwestern Peninsula Malaysia. With all 227 passengers and 12 crew aboard presumed dead, the disappearance of Flight 370 was the deadliest incident involving a Boeing 777 and the deadliest in Malaysia Airlines history until it was surpassed in both regards by Malaysia Airlines Flight 17, which was shot down while flying over conflict-stricken eastern Ukraine 4 months later on the 17th of July 2014. The combined loss caused significant financial problems for Malaysia Airlines, which was renationalized by the Malaysian government in August 2014. The search for the missing airplane, which became the most expensive in aviation history, focused initially on the South China Sea and Andaman Sea, before analysis of the aircraft's automated communications with an Inmarsat satellite indicated a possible crash site somewhere in the southern Indian Ocean. The lack of official information in the days immediately after the disappearance prompted fierce criticism from the Chinese public, particularly from relatives of the passengers, as most people on board Flight 370 were of Chinese origin. Several pieces of marine debris confirmed to be from the aircraft washed ashore in the western Indian Ocean during 2015 and 2016, after a 3-year search across 46,000 square miles of ocean failed to locate the aircraft. The Joint Agency Coordination Center heading the operation suspended its activities in January 2017. A second search launched in January 2018 by private contractor Ocean Infinity also ended without success after 6 months. Relying mostly on analysis of data from the Inmarsat satellite with which the aircraft last communicated, The Australian Transport Safety Bureau, ATSB, proposed initially that a hypoxial event was the most likely cause given the available evidence, although no consensus has been reached concerning this theory among investigators. At various stages of the investigation, possible hijacking scenarios were considered, including crew involvement, and suspicion of the airplane's cargo manifest. Many disappearance theories regarding the flight have also been reported by the media. The Malaysian Ministry of Transport's final report from July 2018 was inconclusive, but highlighted Malaysian ATC's failures to attempt to communicate with the aircraft shortly after its disappearance. In the absence of a definitive cause of disappearance, air transport industry safety recommendations and regulations citing Flight 370 have been intended mostly to prevent a repetition of the circumstances associated with the loss. These include increased battery life on underwater locator beacons, lengthening of recording times on flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders, and new standards for aircraft position reporting over the open ocean. 9. Amelia Earhart disappearance. Amelia Mary Earhart was an American aviation pioneer and writer. Earhart was the first female aviator to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. She set many other records, was one of the first aviators to promote commercial air travel, wrote best-selling books about her flying experiences, and was instrumental in the formation of the 99s, an organization for female pilots. Born and raised in Atchison, Kansas, and later in Des Moines, Iowa, Earhart developed a passion for adventure at a young age, steadily gaining flying experience from her 20s. In 1928, Earhart became the first female passenger to cross the Atlantic by airplane, accompanying pilot Wilma Stouts, for which she achieved celebrity status. In 1932, piloting a Lockheed Vega 5B, Earhart made a non-stop solo transatlantic flight, becoming the first woman to achieve such a feat. She received the United States Distinguished Flying Cross for this accomplishment. In 1935, Earhart became a visiting faculty member at Purdue University as an advisor to aeronautical engineering and a career counselor to female students. She was also a member of the National Woman's Party and an early supporter of the Equal Rights Amendment. Known as one of the most inspirational American figures in aviation from the late 1920s throughout the 1930s, Earhart's legacy is often compared to the early aeronautical career of pioneer aviator Charles Lindbergh, as well as to figures like First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt for their close friendship and lasting impact on the issue of women's causes from that period. During an attempt at becoming the first woman to complete a circumnavigational flight of the globe in 1937 in a Purdue-funded Lockheed Model 10E Electra, Earhart and navigator Fred Noonan disappeared over the central Pacific Ocean near Howland Island. The two were last seen in Lee, New Guinea, on July 2, 1937. On the last land stop before Howland Island and one of their final legs of the flight. She presumably died in the Pacific during the circumnavigation, just 3 weeks prior to her 40th birthday. Nearly 1 year and 6 months after she and Noonan disappeared, Earhart was officially declared dead. Investigations and significant public interest in their disappearance still continue over 80 years later. Decades after her presumed death, Earhart was inducted into the National Aviation Hall of Fame in 1968 and the National Women's Hall of Fame in 1973. She now has several commemorative memorials named in her honor around the United States, including an urban park, an airport, a residence hall, a museum, a research foundation, a bridge, a cargo ship, an earth-fill dam, 4 schools, a hotel, a playhouse, a library, multiple roads, and more. She also has a minor planet, planetary corona, and newly discovered lunar crater named after her. She is ranked 9th on Flying's list of the 51 heroes of aviation. And this brings us to the last one on our list, number 10. Flight 19. Flight 19 was the designation of a group of 5 General Motors TBM Avenger torpedo bombers that disappeared over the Bermuda Triangle on December 5, 1945, after losing contact during a United States Navy overwater navigation training flight from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, Florida. All 14 airmen on the flight were lost, as were all 13 crew members of the Martin PBM Mariner flying boat that subsequently launched from Naval Air Station Banana River to search for Flight 19. A report by Navy investigators concluded that flight leader Lieutenant Charles C. Taylor mistook small islands offshore for the Florida Keys after his compasses stopped working, resulting in the flight heading over open sea and away from land. The report was later amended by the Navy to read cause unknown to avoid blaming Taylor for the loss of 5 aircraft and 14 men. The report attributed the loss of the PBM aircraft to an explosion in midair while searching for the flight. And that's a wrap on today's video. If you have any suggestions on upcoming videos, please do drop them in the comments below. And if you like the content, please hit that like and subscribe button. That's it from me. Until next time.